Hello everybody, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. This is a video on why the rent is so damn high. I'm going to be talking from the perspective of someone living in Vancouver, BC, but it would be applicable in a lot of other places given the same economic environment. So we have this issue of very high rents and high property values. High rents are a product of high property values, and it's been well documented in social media and on the news, the effects of a lot of artistic spaces getting shut down, a lot of venues getting shut down, a lot of pressure on low-income families to make the rent, and so on. I'm not going to go into the effects of living in a high-rent environment. I think they're fairly well documented. What isn't very well documented are the reasons for the increases in Vancouver housing prices. And you get a lot of what I would consider false reasons, and I'll mention a couple. You have the idea of sort of the hot Asian money, which is that the Chinese are coming and buying all of our real estate and driving up the price and blah, 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 which I think has the same economic literacy as they took our jobs anti-immigrant stance. You have the argument that Vancouver is now a world-class city and people just realize how much it's worth and all these international investors jumping on board. But that, again, is not really factually true. And if it is, it's going to have a much smaller effect than people are giving it credit for. There is a very specific reason why Vancouver real estate prices are so high, and I would say it has everything to do with the supply and distribution of credit. There's two things I'm going to focus on, and one is a CMHC, and one is interest rates. I know this is going to be an exciting whirlwind tour. Buckle your seatbelts. One, the CMHC. The CMHC is a horrible government agency whose goal is to help people into housing by allowing them to take out credit. And the mechanism for this is if you put that under 25% for a mortgage, you get a CMHC loan, which means that the government will back the bank if you default, which means the bank will lend you more money than they normally would. And on the surface, that seems like, okay, that's kind of a good idea, because, what if you didn't have enough money, and then, the rat bastard banks aren't going to lend it to you, and then what are you going to do? So, great, the government's going to help out, the working class to get into housing that they wouldn't be able to get into. And it would be great if it was only, one or two people, or, like you or me, because then we could walk into an apartment that was, let's say, $150,000 in a more reasonable place, and we could be able to bid that little bit more than everyone else, because we would have a government-backed line of credit to buy the apartment with that no one else would have, and that'd be great for us. But of course, the CMHC is for everyone, and so the effect is that now everyone is bidding up apartments, not based on amount of money they have, but the amount of credit they're allowed to have, because the government is backing the amount of credit the banks will give you. So most people go into a bank, like 90% of people, when they want to buy a house, they have 20 or 30,000 or whatever, and they go into a bank and they say, what's the biggest loan I can get? And so the bank will say, I don't know, 200,000, maybe 300,000, and that will then become their budget. That's how much they can spend on an apartment. Now, of course, if the government wasn't backing the loan, the answer from the bank wouldn't be 200 or 300,000. It'd be, and I'm just pulling numbers up, but it establishes the principle. Maybe it would be 150,000. Maybe it would be 200,000. And so what you get by the government getting involved is you get a lot of people going in to buy apartments, playing with basically fantasy, funny money credit that they would never be able to get. And the end effect is that everyone now has to compete in this environment where everyone's hopped up on credit, and so people who do buy the apartment just end up owing way more debt. So the effect of the CMHC, which has a proposed goal of allowing more people to get into real estate, is it allows a lot less people to get into real estate, and those who do pay dearly for the privilege of doing so. So step one, if you're serious about tackling the issue of high rents, which is caused by high property values, you have to disband the CMHC. If you disband the CMHC, the amount that people could get from their banks would be way lower, and everyone would be bidding with each other with a lot less money, and everyone would have a lot less debt and a lot less carrying costs to carry their mortgage, which means that the rents would go down. Step 2 involves the interest rate. The interest rate right now is, I believe it's 1% still. And that also seems like something that would be like kind of good, because who wants to pay interest, and that's a good thing for the consumer. Well, it's a negative thing if the government artificially lowers interest rate to 1% and keeps it there. Why? Because when the interest rate's low, the prices of housing goes up, because for the same reason, people can get a lot more credit. And it's interesting, a lot of people don't understand how interest rate works with mortgage payments, but let's say if the Bank of Canada rates 1% and your mortgage is 3%, you could have, let's say your mortgage is $300,000, your mortgage payment is going to be about $1,400 a month. Now, let's say that 3% goes to 8%, 5% increase. Most people say, well, 5%, what's the big deal? What if something goes up 5%? So what? Well, that so what means your $1,400 mortgage payment is now $2,300. I didn't just do this in my head. I used the calculator beforehand. So your mortgage goes up $1,000, almost $1,000 a month if the interest rate goes up 5%, which is something that people don't think of. And in the 2008 real estate collapse, this like widespread economic illiteracy took hold to a tragic extent. So when the government suppresses the interest rate to 1%, it enables people to carry mortgages that they would never be able to carry otherwise. And so you've seen in the last 10 years or maybe even a bit longer, as Vancouver real estate just went up, almost exponentially, you see the government doing all the wrong things. So lowering interest rate, lowering, 5%, 4% down to 1%. The CMHC at the same time allowing mortgages from 25 years to 30 years to 35 years. In 2006, it was 40 years mortgages they were guaranteeing. And what that does is it enables people to have a ton of unfounded, unnatural credit that they would never have gotten in the free market. And all these people are going with maybe like a little bit above middle-class jobs, making, $70,000 a year, $60,000 a year, buying apartments that they could barely afford. And this is a more reasonable explanation for the increase in housing relative to wages. The way in which you can have this huge increase in the price of housing, whereas while wages stay flat, is that people have the same wages, but they just have way more credit. And of course, if you're renting, this is really bad for you because you have nothing to do with it, but you're stuck in this game because now you have to pay the increase in the mortgage payments that your landlord has to pay to his bank. So step 2 is you have to allow interest rates to rise to something reasonable, something, they're not going to allow it to be what the market would have it be, but something more reasonable, 5%, 6%. There's another big effect of having the interest rate at 1%. If you are someone who is, let's say, looking at retiring and you have some money and you want to figure out how you're going to retire, well, you have to do something with your money. And if the interest rate is 1% and you're getting from your bank and your bank account, 1.5% interest, that's nothing. But it's worse than nothing because it's actually negative. Because if the interest at your bank's 1.5%, but inflation is 5%, then you're actually losing 3.5% a year by keeping your money in the bank. Literally as if someone took 3.5% from your bank. Your purchasing power of that money is losing 3.5% a year. So now all of these people that, for instance, have no business in the stock market are throwing their money into the stock market because they lose it, they just put it in the bank. And of course they lose it huge in the stock market most of the time because they shouldn't be there. It should be for people who know what they're doing. And then people are getting into investing in real estate, which is kind of like a new idea because real estate should be consumption good. Real estate isn't an investment. Real estate isn't a capital good. It doesn't produce things. Real estate is an item of consumption, in my opinion. So all these people are investing in real estate because they have to somehow not lose their money in the bank. So, a lot of these baby boomers say would love to just park their money in 5, 6, 7% interest rate bank and just allow the magic of compounding interest to help them with their retirement. But instead, they're forced to fund these investment schemes. They're going to go buy a house, and they don't really want to deal with it. They don't want that call at 2 in the morning, like, oh, hey man, the toilet overflowed and it's flowing into the bottom of the basement, and you got to call someone. They got to go fix it. They don't want to deal with it. But all these people are thrust into speculating in the real estate market. One, because they saw that it performed spectacularly due to government intervention, and two, they'll just lose it if they keep it in the bank. So you must allow interest rates to rise for those two reasons. If you were to disband the CMHC and allow interest rates to rise to something resembling market levels, you would have a 50% collapse in real estate prices immediately. Literally, I mean, it would be vicious, and it would be so vicious that it would be political suicide for any politician to allow it to happen. Which is why it's probably only going to happen when it's too late and there's nothing else they can do about it. So that is all I really want to say about that. When I drive through suburbs and I'm looking at these rows of houses, all I can think in my head is just these number signs of all these houses, everyone paying these mortgages or paying these rents that are going to the landlords to pay these mortgages. And all they're doing is paying off, they're paying bank interest on ridiculous amounts of debt that they should have never been able to have and shouldn't be able to have. And this is, of course, nothing to do with getting into more of the truer evils of the enormous privilege banks has from the government, namely that when you got that mortgage, that money never existed beforehand. Namely that when you're a landlord, or if you are a landlord, when you went and got your mortgage, it wasn't the guys down the street's savings that he got 1.5% and the bank charges you 4% and they keep the interest. That money never existed. You went to the bank can create money due to the fractional reserve lending system and lend it to you at interest and collect your interest. And if you can't pay it, the CMHC will bail out the bank. And of course, the CMHC, through the government doesn't have money because the government doesn't produce anything. The CMHC will just force a taxpayer to pay back the bank for the mortgage the person should have never been able to get and has defaulted on. So I hope that clears it up. I hope I didn't throw 1,000 things too many on there. Suffice it to say, the system seems more or less rigged in my mind. If you were to design a system that would impoverish the middle class and the lower class at the advantage of the banking interest, I think this is a pretty good one, which leads me to my eternal question: are politicians evil or stupid? Did they not know that this would be the effects of they're creating a credit bubble in the asset class of housing, or are they doing it on purpose? I'll leave that up to you to decide, dear listener. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your comments and flaming. Until next time.